The fellow who set himself on fire. Self-Immolation. Friday, during the Trump trial. Or as one CNN reporter said, he was emblazoned. I can't blame her. It's rather disconcerting to see a replication of the monk incident. But there's been talk about MKUltra. And of course, you being a follower of me, you must know that I have something to say about this. And if you know anything about it, you probably are hip to the history of it and how it makes complete and total sense. You know, it's funny how many things we don't know. In a related story with all of this brouhaha that's going on regarding Columbia University and the president and what she did or didn't know or didn't do, I remember in 2014, 2015, Mattress Girl. You'd be surprised how many people in New York know nothing about Mattress Girl and that travesty. Spend your time, research it. I'm not going to waste time on this. I'm not wasting time, but it's another example of what people don't know. After all, we still don't know where Kate Middleton is. Isn't that interesting? That's mind control. That's menticide, but I digress. In April of 1953, Allen Dulles was the newly appointed director of the CIA, the first civilian director. And he was giving a speech at Princeton to, I guess, fellow alumni or alumni in any event. And the Korean War was coming to an end. And for the first time, Americans were becoming aware of this thing called brainwashing. The New York Times had talked about it. There was a startling story about American POWs who were brought back and who were somehow converted to communist ideologies through their brainwashing, menticide. In Korea, I remember it was Booker, the Pueblo, 73 men sailed. No. Okay. Some detainees and POWs were admitting to crimes and pledging allegiance to communism, claiming responsibility and complicity in germ warfare against the communists. I mean, the U.S., of course, said, what are you talking about? And others refused to return to the United States. It's as if something very strange was going on, and they didn't know what to do. Well, as stated, John Foster Dulles is his brother, Allen Dulles, had just become the first, again, civilian director. And the agency he and his brother were responsible for so much of our current mess that we're in. But what they did was he reassessed the priorities of what the CIA should be. And he made a quote. This is a quote. He said, quote, "In the past few years, we have become accustomed to hearing much about the battle for men's minds, the war of ideologies. Further, quote, I wonder, however, whether we clearly perceive the magnitude of the problem, whether we realize how sinister the problem for men's minds has become in Soviet hands. We might call it, in its new form, brain warfare." And it began this incredibly fascinating trajectory, if you will. He talked about phrases like Soviet brain perversion techniques. He says they were effective, albeit nefarious and abhorrent and horrible. He was looking at these Americans coming back from Korea, cored out shells, like, ambulatory mannequins of what they used to be, parroting and echoing and mimicking classic, rote, communist tropes and propaganda. And they had maybe what was it, hypnosis? Was it drugs? What was it? What was interesting, though, and this is the most important, the reason why he loved the idea of menticide, of brainwashing, was that he could say the reason why these soldiers became so smitten to this ideology wasn't because of its inherent value or truth, but because of the facility that their brains now enjoyed, this febrility through fragility. You know, they were fevered by this lunacy. So therefore, they're saying that's the only way anybody could ever buy into this communist business. Not because it makes sense economically, but because they were crazy. And they were off to the races. Off to the races. Brain warfare was it. Now, newspapers all over the place. We're talking about new evils seen in brainwashing. Brainwashing versus Western psychiatry. Remember movies like The Naked Lunch and The Naked Gun. I'll get to that in a moment. The Manchurian Candidates. One of the episodes, remember The Naked Gun? I forget which one it was, with Ricardo Montalban. He says, where he takes his secretary, who was the mother of one of the director producers, anyway, and he gets her to, I must kill Pap Schmear. Same thing with OJ, with Reggie Jackson, who played this character. The bottom line is we've always been toying with the idea of taking somebody and making them a lethal killer, making them do things that they don't want to do by virtue of this thing called brainwashing or menticide. Enter MKUltra. Mind Control Ultra. This was his absolute crowning touch. He was looking at electroshock therapy, ECT, hypnosis, radiation, polygraphs, drugs, toxins, chemicals, hallucinogens, you name it. They took people who were dupes, people who were soldiers, kids in schools, mentally impaired boys in state schools, quote, sexual psychopaths. They've always wanted to do this. There was this called the MDSO program. I remember as a prosecutor hearing about this, a mentally deranged sex offender program where they would take pederasts and as you would call them, pedophiles and chronophiles and predators, and they would use plethysmographs to determine, based upon the amount of registered penile tumescence, whether they like certain things. They would try it through negative conditioning and the like through aversive conditioning to punish them and shock them as they viewed pictures of children. I mean, imagine this: getting deranged, psychopathic child sexual predators, showing them kiddie porn and then zapping them. Not a good idea. But they were on to something, my friends. Look at Whitey Bulger. Who was going through acid tests in 1957 in Atlanta. This thing was through LSD. I think wasn't Ted Kaczynski in that? I don't know. Remember these names, Doctors Harry Williams and Carl Pfeiffer. These were big into this whole thing. And don't forget the name of the Big Daddy. Don't forget the Gottlieb. Remember Sidney Gottlieb. He was the granddaddy of all this. How about this one? You probably never heard of this one. Operation Midnight Climax. No, that wasn't a late night musical show that Don Kirshner put on. It was my favorite. 1955, there was a place in San Francisco, 225 Chestnut Street, the now famous 225 Chestnut. And there was a fellow named George White who basically made this place into almost a campy bordello with ornate curtains and Latouche-Lautrec posters and something from I don't know what. They put bugging devices, and they got a bunch of prostitutes. And this guy turned out to be a real Class A perv, George Hunter White. He was at one time the supervisor of the Federal Narcotics Bureau. So he knew. And by the way, there was an absolute race to master LSD production and the like. Remember lysergic acid, diethylamide, tartrate, and Hoffman, and all those guys. LSD 25. And that's why Joe Rogan and all you guys with your psychotropics and your hallucinogens, just remember, be very careful. A mind is a terrible thing, okay? Now, during the course of this, he set up this two-way mirror. He would have a martini in one hand and watch as he would get prostitutes that they would pay. They would grant them immunity in the event they were to be caught, in case some cop, whatever, were to find them out, so to speak. And they would have their way with people, but they would dose the Johns, either people off the street, again, servicemen, whoever. They would film and record and learn how they can incorporate not only drugs later on, but the use of honeypot. This is as old as the day is long, but as far as the honeypot goes, to get these folks perhaps to find out when they are the most apt to reveal state secrets, how prostitutes could be trained even to find out classified information through sexual encounters. Meanwhile, this guy was just getting his jollies just watching this. But still, this was a part of the mindset. Very, very advanced. And if you think this went away, because in the 70s, there was the demise. It was the Inspector General said, let's shut this down. 1977, Ted Kennedy said, let's shut this down. Then later on, with the church committee, but that's still going on. You know they didn't stop anything. Because as you know now, the CIA in particular can do whatever it wants, and they can run roughshod. Menticide, mind control, blackmail. Let me ask you something. I'm going to say something to you, and you tell me whether this is at all possible. They find out that a particular person, a congressman, politician, somebody of note, has a particular penchant, a predilection, a predisposition, a propensity for CSAM, child sexual abuse material, or improper relations with children, sexual and otherwise. They know this. Some rogue element of some shadow government operative group decides to find a child or information, set somebody up, set up a, whoever it is, congressman, senator, person of note, captain of industry, whatever. Catch them in the act. And then hearken back. Because remember, we always look to the arts to find out sometimes what people are thinking. In Godfather 2, remember in the 1974 Godfather 2, Senator Geary, remember Pat Geary? By the great G.D. Spradlin, who was also a big actor in the Dragnet series. He wakes up with a dead prostitute. Al Neary got him. And they owned him. Now, this has been going on. What do you think was the primary reason behind the Epstein operation? What was Epstein over the years? This hedge funder that nobody investigated? Come on. It was a honeypot. It was an extortion operation, the likes of which no one could ever even imagine. And that's exactly what that was. And if you had to guess who was the beneficiary of that, Israel. Mossad, the best. Look at the connections of that one. I mean, just use your head. Epstein, Dershowitz was his lawyer. Ehud Barak, others. There was a And I say this not as I'm an anti-Semite. They're brilliant. We do the same thing. Some people are suggesting that maybe this Mike Johnson. I'm not suggesting anything in particular, but it would not surprise me if somebody somewhere said, we know what to tell you. Why? Because of the fact that he seems to be doing such a 180. So let me tell you something, and you listen and listen good. MKUltra is gone. They call it something else. Or better yet, it doesn't have a name. If you think that this mindset went away in 1977 or the 50s, you're out of your mind. It's just the beginning. Everything and anything that can be done. And by the way, not necessarily to control the bad guys or benefit the United States. It has nothing to do with benefiting our country and our way of life. It's about control. It's about the shadow government maintaining control. Think about that, dear friends. Think about that. Have a great and a glorious day. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate it immensely. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit that little bell so you're notified of live streams and new videos. And whatever you do, I beg, beseech, importune, and ask that you comment as you see fit.